Okay, so have you ever played KOF and wondered why this happens? So in this video, let me try to very quickly give an overview as to why you can do flying kicks with Iori.
Okay, so I have been wanting to make this video for a very long time. And before I start with the topic, let me just tell you that if you find what I'm talking about interesting at all, then please help me out by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. If you do so, then YouTube is going to help me recommend the video to other people who would find it interesting. You know, that's how it works. So please help me out here. Let's hit the algorithm with an instant overhead and just get this channel growing. Thank you so much. Now let me talk about the velocity things.
For this video, I'm going to go a little bit deep on the topic, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about math. But don't worry, I'm not going to overwhelm you with a lot of math terminology and complicated things. I'm just going to do a very basic overview about what's going on under the hood. Now, first, let me try to very quickly explain to you how important backdashes are in KOF. So, if you're not very familiar with KOF, a lot of special moves come out if you do them from a backdash. And in fact, this is one of the main ways people do tiger knee commands in certain situations. For example, if you're playing K-Dash in KOF 13 and you hit someone with your Neomax, you can actually get a lot more damage if you hit them with a tiger knee minute spike at the end. Now, if you think about it, it sounds pretty hard to input a tiger knee minute spike command because you need to go backwards and then hit up forwards. But that would be if you are in a Street Fighter situation. But now that you're in KOF, you can actually do minute spike out of your backdash. So the way players perform this maneuver is by simply backdashing after doing the command for minute spike, and then you can get the instant aerial minute spike easily. So actually, what happens in KOF is that you can actually cancel most aerial moves from a backdash. There's only a few exceptions. For example, if you have an aerial throw like Venimaru, you cannot cancel into it, it will just fail. And there are some moves in the game which have some height restrictions. For example, with Mai, those moves also will not work, and usually they do not work off of a hop either. But when it comes to command moves, usually most aerial command moves will come out of a backdash. So there's actually quite a substantial list of characters that can do the same thing Iori can, but in terms of movement, it's not very efficient for all of them. So here are the characters that can do the same thing using command moves. First, there's Kyo and his clones, Kusanagi and Kyo 2. There's Athena with down B. There's Bao. He has two command moves, down A and down B. And with Bao, you can actually do some goofy stuff like this, I guess, in certain situations. So there's also a Hell with down D. This is actually quite useful, and you can actually see some players using this for movement. There's Jun with down B. Now, down B is a really goofy move because it actually pushes him forward. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that you were somehow stuck in a corner. You can do really goofy stuff like this. Now, Mai is the one with a height restriction. She can do down A and down B, but it is actually down D, the one which has a height restriction. You cannot even do this one out of a short jump, but it's quite clear why. It gives her a lot of momentum, so if you were doing this off of a backdash, I think it would be really annoying. Finally, you have EX Robert, which can do this useful kick with the down forward D. And that's about it. That's more or less all the characters with aerial command moves, which more or less can do the same thing Iori can. But let's try to dig in and understand why Iori's kick behaves in that way. So to do that, let's look at how aerial moves work in KOF. Let me show you here. This is the PS2 version of KOF 2002 UM, and I'm using a custom data viewer that I programmed many years ago. And with this, we're going to be able to look at the physics of the moves. So the way jumps work in KOF is you have a fixed horizontal velocity, so it's a constant, and then the only thing you have which is changing is your jump velocity. So you have a starting vertical velocity and a gravity constant, which is different for every character, which is added every single frame to decrease the velocity. But what happens to a backdash? So a backdash actually uses very different physics. The vertical velocity follows the same principle. You have a starting velocity and then you have a gravity constant, which is modifying the vertical velocity. But the horizontal velocity is actually quite special in KOF, because here we actually have an example of exponential decay. So the way this works is you have a starting horizontal velocity and then you have a friction constant. So every single frame you multiply again by the friction constant. So this is actually an example of exponential decay, and it is actually what makes KOF physics so iconic and so hard to replace.
Nice.
If you have ever played a new version of KOF and it just feels off for some reason, this is the reason why. Because KOF is the only fighting game which has very specific exponential decay for a lot of its movement. So, what happens when you're doing an air command move out of a backdash? Well, just think about the rules of doing command moves in the air. Command moves by default always follow the same mathematical model as a jump, precisely because you want to preserve the jump arc when you're doing a normal move. So what happens is they use the same gravity constant as jumping, and all they do is when you use a jumping normal or a jumping command move, it takes whatever is your vertical velocity at that time and whatever is your horizontal velocity at that time, it takes them right as the starting velocities and it just keeps applying the gravity, which is the jumping gravity. So what happens if you put those rules and use the move out of a backdash? So what you're doing is with the backdash, you start with an exponential decay in your horizontal speed. So it starts very fast. And then what you do is when you have the command move, you force it to be constant. And then you start to land with the same gravity as you do with the jump. So if you have a really high vertical position and vertical speed, you will actually land slowly compared to how you land from a regular backdash. So that's why he flies backwards, because you're taking a velocity that was supposed to be decaying in exponential way, but now it remains constant. So he's just whoop, he just flies away, man. And that is why Iori flies backwards in KOF. You can tell your friends. And of course, there are many other special moves that you can do in KOF. Doing special moves from backdash, like I explained earlier, is very important and very useful for many characters, and you can do some really silly stuff if you pick broken characters like Nightmare Geese. But don't do that against your friends. Do not make your friends angry. Just have a good time. Anyway, that was the video for today. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have any more questions regarding the KOF velocities, if you think it will be interesting for me to make a video just talking about the KOF velocity model, I would definitely love to do that. Just let me know in the comments, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next video.